Well, hello, Confirmands. It is good to see you again. I hope you are well. This is year one of our confirmation curricula, Lutheran Foundations. Year one is called It Starts Here, Stories of the Old Testament. We are on lesson 13 already. Lesson 13 is called The 12 Spies and the Wanderings of Israel. It could also be called Moses Part 3. This is the lesson in which we get to the end of Moses' life and the transition to new leadership. So there's a lot of little pieces here. I encourage you to read the stories in your Bible storybook. I encourage you to read them in your Bibles so that you can get all of the details. There's a lot of details that aren't in the Bible storybook that are in the Bible. And then I want you to do what we've been talking about from the beginning, to just let these stories into your bones. Let them baptize your imaginations. Let them bounce around inside you and percolate inside you. Because these stories all grow on each other. They all connect to each other, not just this year, the Old Testament year, but in the Jesus year as well, and then beyond, that you'll start to see linkages between different Bible stories, one to another, and this is part of the basic education that we're trying to get you in this confirmation curriculum. So, when we ended last time, Israel has been moving through the wilderness. God has been providing for them. God has been caring for them. God has protected them from their enemies. God has sent manna from heaven. God has sent quail so that they have meat to eat. You remember, and if you don't, you can always go back. But we get right up, when we start today, we get right up to the edge of the Promised Land, right up to the edge of Canaan. And God says to Moses, send some spies into the land so that they can look around for you. And so Moses picks 12 guys and he sends them into Canaan with instructions to look around the land, to see if the people live in tents or if they live in walled cities, to see what the land is good for and what it's not good for, what the foodstuffs are, whether the land is good for grazing. Just spend some time and learn all you can about this land that we're going to be moving into. And so these 12 guys go into Canaan and they spend 40 days there. 40 days walking around, looking around, talking to people. And at the end of 40 days, they come back to Israel, to Moses and to the people. And they brought with them a bunch of grapes that's so big that they had to carry it between two guys. And they are just filled with how wonderful this land is, that there's standing timber and there's beautiful fields and there's water and grazing areas. But 10 of the guys think that it's too good to be true, that there's no way that we can take this land. The people are too strong. Their cities are too strong, and the people are giants. They say that they'll squash us like grasshoppers. They'll squash us like bugs. Only 2 of the spies, Joshua and a guy named Caleb, say, no, we got to trust God. God has gotten us out of Egypt. Did you forget that? God fed us in the wilderness. God protected us from our enemies. God opened the Red Sea and we walked across on dry land. What are you talking about? We can do this. We should go forward. We should do it right now. But the people listened to the 10. And the people were afraid, and the people began to call out against Moses that, why did you bring us here? We're going to have a lot of that this week. Just a lot of complaining and a lot of back and forth and up and down. And it's going to feel a lot like taking a car trip with a whiny 3-year-old. If those are your sensibilities, trust your instincts. So they cry out against Moses. There are some people who actually want to kill Joshua and Caleb. And God comes down, the presence of God comes down into the tabernacle, and God has had it. God is not happy with this complaining and the people complaining against Moses and wanting to go back to Israel and wanting to stone Joshua and Caleb. And God says to Moses, I'm going to get rid of these people. I've had it with them. And Moses says, no, please. We've had this conversation before. If you kill them, the Egyptians will laugh at you and mock you. You're a merciful God. Please forgive them. And God says, for your sake, Moses, I'll forgive them. But, and this is something we've talked about before, there are consequences. Forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences. And the consequence God sets is that all of the adults who were complaining and siding with the 10 spies, they don't get to enter the promised land at all. that God's going to turn the whole people around and he's going to send them back out into the wilderness to wander around until all of those people are dead. And then God will let the young people, the people who didn't complain, into the promised land. So this is a terrible punishment. But again, this is who God is, and this is who you'll be when you're a parent someday, that forgiveness doesn't equal freedom from consequence. So they go back out into the wilderness. Now, out into the wilderness, the up and down stuff continues, the complaining and the forgiveness, the complaining. It just goes on and on and on. And when they get out in the wilderness, there's a guy named Korah. I think that's how his name is pronounced. Korah gets sick of being in Moses' shadow. And Korah says to himself, why are Moses and Aaron in charge? I'm a Levite just like them. Remember, there's 12 tribes. Levi was one of the 12 sons of Israel. The Levites are the descendants of Levi. And the Levites are the ones that are in charge of taking care of the tabernacle. So Korah says to himself, I'm a Levite just like them. Why should I be second banana to them? I don't like it. I want to be in charge. And he starts agitating. When you grow up and you're in a church, you're going to be just shocked that there are people in every church who just agitate, just make trouble. And it doesn't take many to bring the whole thing down. And Korah very quickly gets about 250 guys to agree with him that there's no reason that Moses and Aaron should be in charge, that they're perfectly able to be in charge too, and that they cover it all with this religious language, that aren't we all Levites like you, and why should you have this, and the Lord is with all of us, and it's just such a sad thing, and I wish I could tell you you're never going to experience it, but you are. At any rate, Korah has this little rebellion. And Moses takes it very hard because Moses knows that they're not really complaining about him, Moses. They're complaining about God. That Moses didn't ask to be the leader. He was out being a shepherd, taking care of Jethro's sheep, married to one of Jethro's daughters, living his life. God sent him. God put he and Aaron in charge. And for Korah and his band of discontents, this is a rejection of God's will. So Moses is very unhappy about this, and he calls all these guys to come to the tabernacle, to bring their little incense burners. They all had little brass incense burners, to bring them, and then they would figure this out. A couple of the guys don't come. They send a snotty message to Moses saying, who are you to order us around? We're not going to come just because you tell us to come. So Moses takes the leaders of Israel, the leaders of the tribes, and he goes to these guys' tents and he says, so that you will know who's in charge here. It's me and it's Aaron, because God wants, God's going to show you. And God sends an earthquake and the ground opens, and these rebellious guys, their tents, their property, all fall into the pit and are consumed. And then, it got people's attention right there. People decided to listen to Moses and Aaron better for the time being, and that little rebellion is handled. God had Moses take all of those, they're called censers, those little brass incense burners, and flatten them out into brass discs and cover the sides of the altar in the tabernacle with them, so that when people looked at the altar, they would remember this rebellion, and then they would hopefully, honor the leaders that God has chosen, Moses and Aaron, and then future leaders after that. So, okay, we're through that. And you'd think that would be it. But again, people are crying out, why Moses? Why does Moses get to be in charge? Why are the Levites in charge? We're unhappy with this. We'd be better off in Egypt. Why are we here? And God tells Moses, okay, listen, let's try something else with these people. Get the head guy of each tribe and have him bring a rod, a stick, and write his name on this stick. And for the tribe of the Levites, write Aaron's name on his rod, on his stick. So Moses has this bundle of 12 rods, 12 sticks with the 12 names written on them. And God says, bring them into the tabernacle and put them on the floor by the Ark of the Covenant. So Moses does that. The next day, when they go and get the rods, Aaron's rod, even though it's a dead stick, has bloomed. It's like an apple tree in the spring, just covered with lovely blossoms. And Moses brings it out, and all the leaders of the tribes, they recognize their signatures and their sticks. They recognize Aaron's signature and his stick, and they see that it's bloomed, and they go, oh, right, okay, Aaron's supposed to be in charge. Aaron and Moses are supposed to be in charge. And, it goes on that way for another day. They keep wandering around, they're wandering year after year after year. They get to a place called Meribah, and there's no good water there. And again, they complain against Moses. They complain against God. Why did you bring us here? We're out in the desert. We're going to die. There's no sense of responsibility, that we're out in the desert and not in the promised land because we disobeyed God, because we didn't trust Caleb and Joshua, because we forgot all the cool things God did for us. There's no responsibility. There's no ownership. It's just complain. So God says to Moses, listen, we'll give them some water. We'll calm them down. What I want you to do is there's a big rock out there. I want you to go. I want you to talk to the rock, and I'll make water come out of the rock, and the people will see that I'm with them, and we'll start again. Well, Moses has had it too. Again, car ride with a 3-year-old. It's not just mom and dad that get mad. Sometimes big brother and big sister get mad too. So Moses has had it. He stomps out of his tent with his shepherd's staff, and he doesn't say anything to the rock. He ignores what God told him. He gives an angry lecture to the Israelites, and then he smacks the rock with his stick, and water gushes out, and he goes huffing back to his tent. Well, God's not thrilled with that. You know how sometimes when your little brother or sister's on your nerves and you decide to discipline them and the folks are unhappy with you? Same deal here. God wanted Moses to talk to the rock and to show the people God's faithfulness. Moses yelled at the people, hit the rock, and it made it look like Moses, was providing water for the people. And so God said to Moses and Aaron, listen, because of that, you guys don't get to go into the promised land either. You're going to still be in charge. I'm going to let you take them right to the edge of the promised land, but you guys don't get to go into either. The rules are the same for everybody, high to low. You didn't listen to me. You didn't obey me. Now you don't get to go in either. So that was obviously a very, very hard, disappointing day for Moses and Aaron, but they continued to do their duty. They continued to lead the people on these wandering paths through the wilderness. They wandered around for 38, 39 years, something like that. And then it was time to start heading back toward Canaan. They wanted to pass through a country called Edom that was held by the Edomites. There's actually a connection here. These would be the people descended from Esau. Remember Jacob and Esau? Israel's descended from Jacob's line. The Edomites claim descent from, the Israelites are descended from Jacob's line. The Edomites claim descent from Esau's line. And so Moses sends a message to the king of the Edomites saying, can we please go through your country? We won't take anything. We won't hurt anybody. We won't even drink from your wells. Just let us go through. And the king of Edom says no, and if you decide to come through anyway, I'm going to bring my army out against you. And Moses doesn't want to have a family fight, so he backs away, and they go around Edom. So they're back in the wilderness. They're taking this long detour. Again, the people are complaining. That's the theme of the day. The people are complaining, and God is just going to keep trying and trying and trying and trying to get their attention, to make them be who they're supposed to be. So God sends fiery serpents, snakes, into the camp. And these snakes, they bite people, and it's really painful, and people die from the snakes. And it doesn't take them long to figure out that they shouldn't be complaining, that they shouldn't be crying out against God. And they go to Moses and they say, we're so sorry, we were totally wrong. Please talk to God, get rid of these snakes. These snakes are killing us, and we're sorry, and we'll never, ever do it again. And Moses goes to God and prays, and God says, Moses, I'm not going to get rid of the snakes. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a way to deal with the snakes. I want you to get some brass. It's an alloy. I want you to make a brass snake, a big one. And I want you to set it on a pole in the center of the camp. And when anyone gets bitten, they can look at the brass snake and they won't die. They'll live. So God's trying a new consequence here. You're still going to get bit. It's still going to get hurt. It's still going to hurt like crazy, but you're not going to die. And God's trying to teach Israel. God's trying to teach them how to be faithful, how to stop complaining, how to do what they're supposed to do, how to keep their attitudes in the right spot. The sort of stuff that you're trying to learn in your life. You know how to regulate your emotions and how to keep your attitude and expectations in line. So this is what Moses does. He makes this snake and he puts it up on a pole, and people who are bitten look at it and they can live. Now, we're not going to talk much about it now, but this snake doesn't just disappear. It shows up later in the Bible. That later in the story, there are people who are actually worshiping this snake. And good King Hezekiah has to deal with that. That's much later. Also, when Jesus is trying to explain who he is to a guy named Nicodemus, he talks about this snake, that Jesus understands his job to be like this snake, this brass serpent that was set up on the pole, that he's going to be lifted up so that everyone who looks at him will live. Jesus knows he's going to be crucified, and it's an image thousands of years later when Jesus is trying to explain who he is and why he came and why he's going to die the way he's going to die. He goes back to this story of the brass serpent, exactly like I've been telling you about these stories, that once these are in your imagination, once these become the vocabulary of your heart and of your mind, then they bubble up in other places. So we're gonna get back to that when we talk about Jesus and his crucifixion. But anyway, that's how Moses deals with the snakes, and the people learn again not to complain. They learn again to trust God. So they're wandering, and God provides water for them. Again, there's another story about how they run out of water, and this time they didn't complain. This time they trusted God. Presumably they still are aching from their snake bites. And the leaders of Israel, they go and they start to dig a well, and the people sing hymns, and God makes water bubble up, and it's a great day. They're attacked by a group called the Amorites, and God defends Israel, and the Israelite army destroys the Amorites and takes their city. They're attacked by the people of Bashan, and again, God defends Israel, gives them strength, and they take the land and the cities of Bashan. So they're not in the promised land yet, but they're already accumulating territory. And then they get up to the country of Moab. And the king of Moab is a guy named Balak. And Balak has been paying attention. He sees what's happened to the Amorites. He sees what's happened to Bashan. And he doesn't want Moab to suffer the same fate. Now, Balak has an ace card. There's a guy living, he's not Moabite, he's Midianite, but he's living among the Moabites. His name is Balaam. And Balaam is, I don't know how we'd think of him, a wise man, a sorcerer. He's a guy who has a reputation that if he says good things about you, good things will happen to you. And if he says bad things about you, bad things will happen to you. And so King Balak of Moab decides that what he really needs to do is he needs to get Balaam to come and say bad things about Israel. So he sends some of his leading honchos to Balaam with rich gifts. Come and say bad things about Israel, and all this money will be yours. Well, Balaam says to the honchos, he says, I'm not in charge of God. So you guys, you go get some rest, and I'll talk to God tonight. And if God says I can come say bad things to Israel, I'll be happy to take your money. But if God says I can't, then I won't. Well, okay. So the princes, the honchos, they go to sleep, and Balaam prays, and God says, no, you can't say bad things about Israel. Israel's mine. I love Israel. Anybody who takes a stand against Israel is taking a stand against me. So in the morning, Balaam says to the princes of Moab, he says, I'm sorry, God is really clear on this. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. Say hi to the king from me, but no. So they go back to the king of Moab, and the king of Moab, maybe he thinks that Balaam is holding out for more money. So he sends more important honchos, more money to Balaam with the same request. Come and say bad things about Israel. And again, Balaam says, I'm not in charge. I'll ask God again, but he was pretty clear last time. But if the king filled my house with gold and silver, but God said, no, I'm not going to do something that God doesn't want me to do. So the guests go to sleep. Balaam talks to God again. God says, okay, go with them, but be really careful that you don't do anything but what I tell you to do. And Balaam says, okie doke, I got it. And then we get to one of the weirdest stories in the Bible. And there are weird stories in the Bible, but this is really an odd one. In the morning when the honchos wake up, Balaam's already ready to go. He's saddled his donkey, and he's ready to go, and they're very excited. We're going to go to the king of Moab. So they head out, and God sends an angel to stand in front of Balaam with a flaming sword. And Balaam can't see the angel, but the donkey does, and the donkey veers into a field. And Balaam gets really mad and beats the donkey, beats it back onto the road. They go on a little further, and there's the path goes between two walls of a vineyard. And the angel is standing right in the path, and the donkey smashes against one of the walls and smashes Balaam's foot. And Balaam again beats the donkey with his rod, with his stick. A little further on, the road is very, very narrow. There's nowhere for the donkey to go. The angel is standing there again. The donkey just sinks to the ground, and Balaam beats on it. And God lets the donkey talk. I told you it was weird. And the donkey says to Balaam, why are you beating on me? I've never done anything wrong to you. I've taken you everywhere you wanted to go since the day you bought me. What's the problem? And then God lets Balaam see the angel. And Balaam sinks to the ground, and he's horrified. And the angel says, 3 times this donkey saved your life. And Balaam says, if you don't want me to go to Moab, I won't go to Moab. I'll just go right home. And the angel says, no. But remember, only say what you're supposed to say. Got it. So they go to Moab. Balaam goes before the king of Moab. The king says, I'm worried about these people. There's just a ton of them. They're going to wash in here. They're going to do to me what they did to the Amorites and to Bashan. I like being the king of Moab. I don't want them to take over my country. So we got trouble here. Balaam says, okay, let's go see what we can do. So they go to a high place overlooking the encampment of Israel. And Balaam says to the king of Moab, build 7 altars, and on each altar sacrifice a sheep and an ox to the one true God. And the king does that. And the smoke is going up into the sky, and Balaam blesses Israel. And the king of Moab is angry. What are you doing blessing them? I didn't bring you here to bless them. I want you to bless me. I want you to curse them. And Balaam says, look, God tells me what to say. I'm not in charge of what I say. Maybe the king thought that, again, he just needed more encouragement or more money, or, who knows what's in the king's head. So he brings him up another hill, also overlooking Israel. 7 more altars, 7 more oxen, 7 more sheep, smoke going up to heaven. And again, Balaam blesses Israel. The king is just crazy angry, crazy mad. I keep telling you not to do this thing, and you keep doing it. And Balaam just can't make the king understand. But here's where it gets really awful. Balaam really wants to make the king happy. He really wants all the money that the king has been offering him. He really wants all the riches. So Balaam says, these people are blessed by God. But if you could turn them from God, then they won't have God's protection anymore. Well, how do I do that? Well, let your young people, the young people of Moab, the young people of Midian, let them mingle with the young people of Israel. Let them date, let them marry. Right? They're not going anywhere for a little bit. They're here right now. So let's make some connections between our young people and their young people. And the king agrees to this, and that starts to happen. There starts to be some dating, some courtship, some marriages. The young women of Moab and Midian, they encourage their new Jewish husbands to come to their festivals for their gods. These Jewish boys bow down to these gods. They participate in the idol worship and in the feasts to make their new wives happy. And God is unhappy. When Moses finds out about it, he orders the execution of all of these young people who have married outside of Israel. Again, I mean, these are stories that are just soaked in blood. And presumably God needs this level of discipline to teach obedience, to teach people to do what they're supposed to do and not do what they're not supposed to do. But so there's lots of executions and a lot of tears and a lot of pain. And then Israel prepares for their last push into the promised land. Now, remember, they've been living for a while in the land of the Amorites and in the land of Bashan, right? And some of the people are pretty happy there, specifically the tribes of Reuben and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh are very, very happy where they are. And they come to Moses and they say, I know you guys are planning to push into Canaan, but we like it here. Could we stay here? And Moses says, well, how would that look to the rest of Israel if they go and fight and you guys just are sitting here taking your leisure, building homes and raising your families while they're fighting and bleeding and dying? And the men of Gad and Reuben and Manasseh, they talk among themselves and they say, okay, that's perfectly fair. So here's the deal. Let us build some sheepfolds and some houses for our families. We'll put them up right quick, and then we will come with you into Canaan. We will fight with you in Canaan, and we will not come back home until you release us, until Canaan is completely free. And then we will come back home, and this land will be ours. Well, that sounded like a win for everybody. So Moses calls the leaders of Israel and says that this part of the world is going to belong to the tribes of Gad and Reuben and some of the tribe of Manasseh, but that the guys are going to come and they're going to help us fight. But then for all time, this land is theirs, and everyone is on board with that. So that happens, and then they get ready for the final push. By this time, though, Moses is very old. And remember, he's under this discipline of God that he's not allowed to go into the promised land himself. Aaron has died a while back. His son Eleazar has taken over Aaron's duties. And now Moses knows that it's his time to die. So he gathers the people together. He gives them a very long talk about being obedient to God and listening to God. He shows them Joshua, whom God has chosen to be the next leader of Israel. He gives Joshua some of his clothing and some of the symbols of his leadership, his office, so that people know that they're supposed to obey Joshua from now on. And then Moses walks out of the camp, and he walks up a little mountain, and the people weep and they watch him go. Until they can't see him anymore. And Moses goes up onto this mountain, and somewhere up on that mountain, Moses dies, and God buries him with God's own hand. We don't know where. There is no tomb. There is no marker. Moses is just gone. But he's never disappeared from history. He's never disappeared from our imaginations. Moses talked to God face to face. He was transformed by God. He was a man like any of us, a human being like any of us. He was a person of appetites like any of us. He was a person of sin. There were moments of profound disobedience that marked his life, and God's mercy covered all of that disobedience. This is our third week talking about Moses. And there are other lessons that you're going to draw. We talked about how Jesus draws lessons from Moses' life. But one of the things I hope that you hear as clearly as I can tell you is no matter what mistakes you have already made, no matter what mistakes you will make, you're not outside of God's mercy. I mean, even the people who complained against God and God sent them back into the wilderness for 40 years to wander, God still fed them. God still gave them water. God still defended them from their enemies. They didn't get the blessing, but they didn't get smashed either. It was only the people who were in open rebellion against God that tasted that kind of judgment. So you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. And I want you to remember to think back about Moses, who was a murderer, who let his anger get the best of him, who made these serious errors of judgment, who had these problems with his character. And God blessed Moses, loved Moses, talked with Moses, forgave Moses, used Moses' life. You're precious. You're wonderful. God created you, and God created you good. And your 5 worst days, or your 100 worst days, can't take you out of God's care, can't take you out of God's love, can't undo the choice God made to make you God's own in your baptism. You belong to God, and you can come home, and God will use you and bless you and nurture you and care for you. That's who God is. That's what God does. So we're at the end of the story of Moses. We got the people of Israel perched at the border of the promised land. We got the tribes of Gad and Reuben and Manasseh, who've got their sheepfolds and their houses built. The men are there ready to fight. And next week, we go into the promised land and we claim this land again. You take care. It is lovely to talk to you. I'm looking forward to our questions and answers. I always love spending time with you, and I wish you nothing but grace. Bye-bye.